So I've been coaching since 1978. Just don't know where the time has gone. And you see a lot in 47 years of experience. Literally hundreds of athletes, coaches, trainers, and medical specialists that I've met. And they've blessed me over the years. But for that reason, I want to talk briefly about something that makes all the difference in sports, performance, and really life itself. And that's what makes a good coach. Now, I'm not talking about wins and losses. Those will come to a good coach. I'm talking about personality and how that shows up every day in the lives of their athletes. Now, what I want to share with you over the years that I've seen are the 5 key traits that I believe embody every truly great coach. And I want to start with the most important one. They care about their athletes as people. A great coach doesn't just see the athlete in front of them. They see the person behind the number, behind the jersey, behind the event. The struggles, the dreams, the fears, the family life, they know it and they listen. They're present and they invest. And when you care about someone as a person first, the performance will often follow. Now, I went to the University of Alabama in the early 80s, right toward the end of Coach Paul Bear Bryant's coaching career. And I was in awe of Coach Bryant. But the thing that I left Alabama years later was that in all the time that I was at Alabama, I never heard one player, I never heard one person who had worked for Coach Bryant say one bad thing about him as an individual. And I can say that's the only place in my working life that's ever occurred. And I think a great deal of that, based on the stories I heard from some of his players and coaches, was that he cared about people. He didn't just care about the sport. He cared about those guys he recruited. And I think that's very important regardless of the domain a coach is working in. Now, second, they're great teachers. And especially they're great teachers of technique and tactics. Now, if you're going to coach professional or elite athletes, you better know your stuff because they're going to call you on it if you don't. The best coaches are also the best educators, and their players trust their knowledge base. They understand that coaching is, at its heart, teaching. And these coaches break down complex movements into simple steps, and they teach their athletes in ways that their athlete can learn and assimilate and display that knowledge. They explain the why, not just the what. And they build athletes who are not just stronger, but they're smarter. Good coaches want their athletes to think on their own, not just wait to be told for the next thing to do. And a great example of this is one of the finest coaches I've ever known, Dan Pfaff. He's probably recognized as the foremost movement analyst in North America. Certainly a great mentor of mine, but Dan has great respect from his athletes because he can teach in ways that they can assimilate the knowledge. And remember, not everybody learns the same way. Dan's figured that out. He does a great job of it. Now, third, a good coach displays confidence and a steady demeanor during competition. Now, when pressure rises, things can change. And I've seen it affect a lot of coaches' personalities. And it actually diminishes their ability to manage their team. But great coaches remain composed in the midst of adversity. They model poise and they model clarity. Their calm becomes very contagious to their athletes. Because, in times of chaos, An athlete's going to look to their coach, not just for direction, they're going to look for reassurance. And a steady presence in the storm often makes the difference between unraveling and rising up. And I can think of one guy that emulates this. Probably the best assistant coach I ever worked alongside of was Andy Reid. Andy Reid was not only a great teacher during the week, he was just like that on game day. And you can still see that. It's not that you don't become emotional at times, but your emotion is under control. He always holds the reins. You watch him coach. Watch how he manages his players. They love him. And there's a reason they love him. But there's also a reason that his teams have been as successful as they have. And being the guy he is on game day, huge advantage. Now, fourth, a good coach is always going to hand out both praise and criticism. But it's always with a purpose. A good coach is not just going to praise you all the time. They're going to correct your errors. And they don't just correct the errors, they affirm your progress. So this is what I've experienced over my coaching career. You can be very critical of most of your athletes when you need to be if you praise them when you need to do that. Coaches that never praise their athletes, a lot of times they have trouble maintaining the respect of those athletes. You got to find something people are doing right and correctly and give them praise for it. But at the same time, a good coach is going to give honest feedback, constructive, never personal. They know when to push and when to pull back, and their athletes trust them because their feedback always comes from a place of truth, and their athletes know they care. Now, finally, good coaches always have a proper estimate of their own value. Great coaches know their worth, but they don't make it about themselves. They're not insecure, and they're not ego-driven. Everybody has an ego, but it's different to be ego-driven. They lead from a place of quiet strength and self-respect, and their athletes sense this. They feel safe under it, and they're more likely to follow someone who knows who they are. So the best example I can give you of this is one that's the closest to me. And you're looking at a former high school track coach right now who is also my mother. She raised 5 children, put them on the bus with her to all her track meets, was a highly successful coach, had national champions, had state champions, but she always cared about her athletes, and it never became an ego thing to her. She knew how to play the role of a coach. I remember just sharing one story to close this thing out. There was a really talented young lady who mom wanted on her track team, but her dad refused to let her run track. So she went to this particular young lady, and she said, "Do you want to run track?" And she said, "Yes, Miss Johnston, but my dad's not going to let me. Not going to let me run track." And she said, "Well, would you be okay if I went and talked to him about that?" And she said, "I think you can, but it's not going to do any good. I know him." And so Mom got in the car, went down there, and this guy he owned a mechanic shop, and he was in there working on a vehicle. So she walks in, and this was back in the late 70s. She said, "Mr. Beecham, I wanted to know if you would consider letting your daughter run track." He said, "No, I don't want to run in track." He said, "I don't know where she's going to be in that time period between getting out of school and coming home." And Mom quietly said, "Well, what if I bring her home every day after track practice. And you can expect her at this time every day, and I personally take her home. Would you be willing to let her run track? And the guy says, if you do that, she can run. And not only did she run, but she became a state champion in multiple events, became the national champion in the late 70s in the triple jump. And it was all because you had an individual who didn't have an ego and was willing to display all these traits we've talked about today. You know, not many folks can say that about their mom. I'm proud to say that, obviously, because I love her so much. 90, going on 91 years old, and she's still with us. In closing, you just need to understand coaching is more than drills and data. It's calling. It's a commitment to shaping people, not just players. And if we get the personality part right, the rest of it tends to fall into place. But thanks for joining the O Coach today, and we'll see you next time.